You will not be able to stay home, brother. You will not be able to plug in, turn on, and cop out. You will not be able to lose yourself on Skag and skip out for beer during commercials because the revolution will not be televised. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution will not be brought to you by Xerox in 4 parts without commercial interruptions. The revolution will not show you pictures of Nixon blowing a bugle and leading a charge by John Mitchell, General Abrams, and Spyro Agnew to eat hog maws confiscated from a Harlem sanctuary. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution will not be brought to you by the Schaefer Award Theater and will not star Natalie Woods and Steve McQueen or Bullwinkle and Julia. The revolution will not give your mouth sex appeal. The revolution will not get rid of the nubs. The revolution will not make you look 5 pounds thinner because the revolution will not be televised, brother. There will be no pictures of you and Willie Mae pushing that shopping cart down the block on the dead run or trying to slide that color TV into a stolen ambulance. NBC will not be able to predict the winner at 8:32 on report from 29 districts. The revolution will not be televised. There will be no pictures of pigs shooting down brothers on the instant replay. There will be no pictures of pigs shooting down brothers on the instant replay. There will be no pictures of Whitney Young being run out of Harlem on a rail with a brand new process. There will be no slow motion or still life of Roy Wilkins strolling through Watts in a red, black, and green liberation jumpsuit that he has been saving for just the proper occasion. Green Acres, Beverly Hillbillies, and Hooterville Junction will no longer be so damn relevant, and women will not care if Dick finally got down with Jane on Search for Tomorrow, because black people will be in the street looking for a brighter day. The revolution will not be televised.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. Really appreciate you all for joining. My name's Tila Evans, and I'm on the partnerships team at Flockjay. And today I am calling in from the West Coast, Oakland, California. Would love to hear from other folks. Let me know, what's your name? Where are you dialing in from? Go ahead and head on over to the chat. We'd love to see where folks are at. Good morning to the West Coast. Good afternoon to the Midwest. Okay, there we go. We got ATL in here. Arizona. Oh, love to see it. Chicago. Yes, we got folks from all over. I love to see that. Amazing. So we're going to get started in a few minutes. And today is really about creating space to center Juneteenth and how we can really show it for the Black community. This is going to be a hard conversation. I'm most certain that there are going to be points that are a bit uncomfortable, and we're going to do this together. This is an important conversation I'm excited to really bring and have here all together. And one of the ways, if you all have been to a ThinkHuman event in the past, one of the ways that we interact with each other is through chat. And I've seen the conversation get incredibly rich. People get really vulnerable in the chat. And so I just really want to encourage folks to share their thoughts, their ideas, their comments, questions. And it's just a really great way to build community and create connection with each other. So don't be shy about being in the chat. Please welcome to everyone who wants to show up in that space. So to kick things off, I would love to hear from some folks around, why you showed up here today. There's a lot of things in our calendars and our schedules, right? Speaking from my own experiences, a Black queer woman in tech, there hasn't been much visibility for Black identified folks, the Black community, until recently. And I had the pleasure of being a part of a grounding call with the panelists here before. And it was great because I think there are a lot of different perspectives on Juneteenth and what that means to all of us. And even with it being passed as a federally recognized holiday, still grappling with what it means that 14 members of Congress voted no and against it. I know that I have a spectrum of feelings, and I'm just incredibly grateful that we get to hear from the folks here on the panel how their feelings around it, how they're navigating those experiences, and really learn together about how we can, really show up, really be there for ourselves and for community. So for any folks that are willing to share, I would love for you to jump in the chat. Let us know, like, what brought you here? How are you showing up for Juneteenth? What does that mean for you? I like this. We have folks that are managers that really want to understand how they can better support their employees. I like this. Bringing knowledge, sharing that, bringing that back to our organizations, learning how we can be more inclusive. Listen and learn, here for that. Yes. Lots of things we'll be talking about. I love this, y'all. Oh, this conversation in my heart. I can't wait. So we'll go ahead and jump into the conversation, but I do want to give a shout out to some of the partners here and just quickly introduce all of them. And so I'll go through the 3 partners that were a part of the conversation for today, and we'll have a poll that'll come up afterwards. So if you're interested in connecting with those organizations, go ahead and indicate on that poll. Pro tip, you can actually select multiple organizations. So the first one's 15.5, near and dear to my heart. They're a Flockjay partner, and they offer a performance management tool. And so it's really focused on helping managers grow and develop their teams. They help facilitate weekly check-ins. And so if you're really looking for a tool to help elevate how you do one-on-ones, better show up for your employees, and really impact their performance, definitely an organization that you want to check out. The next one is Flockjay. So company that I'm a part of, our mission is really to empower upward mobility through education and access. So what we do is offer a sales academy that focuses on upskilling individuals from historically excluded backgrounds. Like, we believe that where you went to school, if you went to a previous, like you were at a tech company previously, that's not indicative of you in being a top sales performer in tech. And so if you're thinking about really growing your sales team and you're really committed to increasing representation in tech, we would love to chat with you and see if we can work together. And then we have ThinkHuman. So ThinkHuman, incredible organization. They're really focused on people leaders, leadership development. They lead amazing cohorts based on really increasing emotional intelligence, really helping you all and supporting like mindset shifts and creating long-lasting change and programming within an organization. So if you're thinking about how can I really up-level my leadership, how can I really think about systemic programs in our organization, I would definitely encourage you to reach out to ThinkHuman to begin that journey. So now you're going to see a poll pop up. So you have a chance to go ahead and select any of those 3 partners there. We'll make sure we'll follow up with some more information for you. All right. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to our moderator, Hakimia. She'll be leading our discussion today. So welcome, welcome. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Tila. Hey, family.
Yes.
Thank you so much for your warm introduction. We are excited to be here. This is a divine timing topic. That's what I call it. Biden assigned the Juneteenth bill, creating the first new federal holiday in decades. Juneteenth, National Independence Day. Did y'all hear me? Juneteenth, National Independence Day will become the 12th legal public holiday and the first one since Martin Luther King Jr. Day, which was signed in 1983 by then President Ronald Reagan. The national consciousness has elevated after a number of tumultuous events from last year to now regarding social justice, racial inequities. Many employees and employers have begun to self-reflect on their own standings within, with the Black community and communities of color. For many companies, and I've seen in the chat today, you're here to explore what does it mean for you and your talent. What does it mean for your diversity and inclusion functions to truly take stage, to process some of the concerns of your people of color or your underrepresented groups? The recognition that's needed today is for us to truly take time to really assess where we are as it relates to racial equity inside and outside of the workplace, which has led to, a number of companies, celebrating the day, giving us the day off. But I seen Pat in the chat say, hey, my company's giving us the day off, but what am I supposed to do with it? I'm trying to figure that out. Guess what? You are in the right place. So while Juneteenth may be new to some, celebrations on this day is widespread. This historical event occurred over 155 years ago. The commemoration of this day, on which the full force of the Emancipation Proclamation was finally realized and legal slavery or legal trauma to the African people and their descendants in America was brought to end. Despite the fact that the Emancipation Proclamation was issued actually on January 1st, 1863, 2 years prior, it didn't reach Galveston, Texas until 2 years later, specifically by General Granger. His first order of business was to read to the people of Texas this significant and important quote, and I state, the people of Texas are informed that in accordance to the proclamation from the executive of the United States that all slaves are free. This involved an absolute equality of rights and rights of property between former masters and slaves, and the connection, hence thereof, existing then between employer and hired labor. In an instance, the government forced slave owners to be employers and to make the very people that they viewed as savages, inferior, incompetent, to force them to be viewed as now employees. Let's be real, y'all. Remnants of this forcing employers to see Black people as employees still exist today in many companies. Later, Texas became the birthplace of the first Juneteenth celebration a year later in 1866. Isn't this ironic? The very state that didn't tell their slaves or enslaved people that they were free made history and made Juneteenth an official holiday. Once a deeply emotional event to some, enslaved Black people are now transformed into a celebration, or transformed Juneteenth into a celebration of resistance and victory at the same time. So it was just a celebration of singing of hymns, spiritual teaching, political discussions, acknowledgement of veterans, and bathing in all things Black excellence. This was a celebration, a full expression of our freedom to the American people. This is more than just Black history webinar, family. This is deeply rooted American history that we're going to be talking about today. So everyone buckle up, and I welcome, and I'm so excited to talk to our expert panelists, thought leaders in the industry, Aaron, technical recruiter at Loom, Francesca Walker, ThinkHuman facilitator and assistant director at NYU, Robert Gordon, business development lead at Flockjay. So starting with you, Francesca, what is your connection and experience with Juneteenth? And how have you celebrated it?
Thanks for that, Hakimia. So, Juneteenth has always been really complicated for me. And one of the things that I shared with you all, fellow panelists before, is that it didn't come up in the curriculum at all. And so I didn't really understand or even know what Juneteenth was until I went to graduate school. And so I think there's something to be said about how our educational institutions are structured, what they feel is important for us to know as people living in this country. And also it's an opportunity for us to really think critically about how we are going to ensure as people, particularly as Black people, that we are going to get the information that we need about our own history and about our own lived experiences. And so, I think for me, since that experience and really coming into the understanding of what Juneteenth is, I've really started to think critically about writing history and writing narratives and what that means to make sure that those are included in our educational institutions. And so I think for me, it's a complicated one, but it's one that has also empowered me to understand that the responsibility is also mine to figure out what my story is, what our story is, and also to write that and ensure that people have access to that story.
Well said. Make sure you unmute, panelists. We want to hear all of your moans and groans. Who's up next?
Go next. Yeah, I was reflecting last night on just Juneteenth and the history of what that means for my family. So there's a couple of things. So as I was reflecting on even the history of my family, my great-grandfather's name was George Gordon. What we know is that he was born a slave in 1850. That's 171 years ago. We know that he was fair-skinned because his coming to existence was likely non-consensual between his slave master father and his mother, who was a slave. And then I called my grandmother yesterday just to talk a little bit more around Juneteenth, what it meant for her. What's interesting and fascinating, she's from the South. That side of my family comes from Richmond, Virginia, by way of Georgia. She marched in the South in the 50s. And what was interesting is she said that she never celebrated Juneteenth because she was too busy trying to survive Southern life. Too busy to celebrate. And that's painful to hear. I didn't learn about Juneteenth in my curriculum because, growing up in a military family, at least in the DODEA system, there was a whole bunch of revisionist history that we were learning, and Juneteenth never popped up. I mean, slavery was like half of a chapter, if that. And then as, and this will resonate with my brothers of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated, but I'm constantly a seeker of knowledge. And in seeking and reflecting on the history of Juneteenth, it's important to know what is and what isn't. So, Hakimi, I'm glad that you shared a little bit about the history of Juneteenth in the beginning of this, but then as we think about kind of the implications of the 1860s and beyond, every decade since the end of slavery, while Black people have accrued just a little bit more wealth or been a little bit more educated or achieved a little bit greater status in American society, there's always been this constant in our lives, right? And it's the presence of random yet intentional violence. And what's really interesting about like the celebration aspect of Juneteenth is you also have to understand, or I also reflect on kind of the balance of all of that, right? Emmett Till, Michael Brown Jr., Trayvon Martin, Eric Garner, Sandra Bland, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, right? We saw George Floyd's murder in high fidelity. And to quote my brother Carlos Hill, his murder was a white man attempting to dominate, belittle, subdue, just flat out murder a Black man who wasn't resisting. He couldn't resist. And so even though slavery ended in 1965, the desire to master and dominate Black bodies have not. So it's this perpetual thing of reflection. When I think about freedom, it's like, are we actually free? So that's where my mind's at. That's where my mind sits right now. And I'm deeply, deeply reflecting on the 14 people in Congress who voted against the Juneteenth bill.
And I think on my end, I'm definitely happy to be here with everyone today. I'm in the minority in my own community, being that I actually did grow up celebrating Juneteenth. So I'm from the Bay Area, shout out to Vallejo, California. Grew up in the church, and every single summer on the weekend near June 19th, we had a celebration on the waterfront. You had Black businesses, you had celebrations, music, art. It was just the entire community coming out and celebrating what it meant of Juneteenth and the importance to our communities. Now, fast forwarding when I go to college and then coming into corporate America, the tech industry, a lot of my colleagues, Black colleagues, had not heard of Juneteenth. And like being in, like, I finally started understanding that I was actually in my own community bubble, which, yes, I'm grateful for that knowledge, but also, again, I think all of us have certain bubbles that we're in. You don't realize that until you take a step outside of that bubble. And so then it got me thinking around, as Rob was mentioning and Francesca, about revisionist history. You know, why isn't this in our textbooks? I may have had a page about slavery in my history books growing up, but you hear a lot about the 4th of July, all of these other holidays, but Juneteenth was never recognized. But I think when I was younger, I actually never knew that because it was just natural in my environment, in my community that I was in, to celebrate that and what it means. So I think a big part of where we're around today and continuing to, one, provide awareness for the why of Juneteenth and the how we continue to move the needle forward is just by that, spreading awareness. I know there's tons of questions now based on the traumatic experience that, you know, Black people have gone through. And, you know, yes, we have a national holiday, grateful for that small win, but want to continue to move the needle forward. And so I love the aspect of today's conversation, really putting our communal ideas together and how we can continue moving the needle forward, because we have a ton of work left to do. And it's going to take all of us, not just Black people, but everyone within our collective communities to continue moving the needle and getting to higher heights. So definitely excited to be part of the conversation today.
Thank you so much, Aaron, for that. And I want to share just a little bit about me and my background. So mine is of mixed. I grew up with my mother. She's Black, but my father's Colombian. And I didn't really celebrate Juneteenth until I moved to Houston after college. So shout out to, I think I've seen Allison or Kimberly from Houston. And I mean, here, full force celebration. We actually have Emancipation Park here. I mean, we have Black Market Weekend and Week. It's a full celebration. It's a lot of rich history from when the enslaved people traveled from Galveston to Houston and created Freedmanstown, and a prominent community as well called Third Ward, which some of you may be, you know, familiar with as it relates to Beyonce. But a lot of rich history, library with the history on there, how our ancestors traveled here with nothing and created something, from pharmacies to their own judicial system, lawyers, doctors. It made me happy to really immerse myself as well as my children and husband and into this history and carry it on and move it forward. So from the words of Sheila Jackson Lee, fellow church member, as well as, you know, Houstonian, I'm full today. I am grateful for the progress that we've made, but also, just like the words of Rob, Aaron, and Francesca, I echo their sentiments. More needs to be done. And so we're excited to share with you what that more looks like. And this is a community question that we had. How do we impart the importance of Juneteenth to leadership when your company has less than 5% Black people?
I think to start, I will say that I think the first thing to start with, I mean, yes, we're talking about Juneteenth in this conversation, but the question is, how do you acknowledge Black humanity, period? I mean, I think that's the first piece of the question. And so, you know, one thing that I appreciate, because I've also been looking at the chat, and, you know, even as I'm talking about the fact that, like, as a Black person, right, and I'm a child of immigrants. My family is actually from Panama, and so that's part of, you know, like, where this lack of understanding is coming from. But also, like, we've acknowledged that for many of us, like, this was not in our curriculum. Like, we might not have, you know, known about this before, and yet, you know, there's still a deep sense of, you know, I'm seeing in the chat that people are kind of like, oh, like, I'm embarrassed that I didn't know, right?
Mm-hmm.
And part of what I want people to also understand is that you weren't supposed to know, right? And like, that's the piece of it. And so, you know, when we talk about, like, what kind of gets in the way of organizations being able to acknowledge Black humanity, period. It's feelings of shame and guilt and all of these things that people are dealing with internally, that is really preventing them from being able to say, you know what, we're talking about Juneteenth, but when we're talking about a conversation of Black liberation, you are a part of that conversation. Like, Black liberation is also your work too, even if you do not identify as Black. And so I think that is part of the conversation. And helping people understand that you're a part of this. And so even as we're thinking about, and I know we're going to get to this, you know, a lot of companies are in one way or another acknowledging Juneteenth, celebrating Juneteenth, and more so in the acknowledging, because there's not a lot of celebrating of Juneteenth that's really happening in these companies, right? Even as we're starting that conversation and the question of, okay, let's say your company gave you a day off, right? What are you supposed to be doing with that?
We're going to get to it, Francesca.
You know, and so, and no, exactly. I'm not going to get too deep into it, but you know, I think that's part of it. Like, let's start with, you've acknowledged this is fantastic, and now, like, what is that looking like in practice? I think that whole question is a metaphor for Juneteenth in general. It's like the acknowledgement of freedom, and then the practice that was delayed. You know, and so that for me is a part of it.
And why is that acknowledgement of freedom so important? What does that symbolize? And this is to everyone, but I'm just, you know, going off of you, Francesca.
I mean, I can keep talking all day, so I don't know if y'all want to.
I'm off mute, Rob. Go ahead, Aaron.
Yeah, I think the acknowledgement of freedom, the acknowledgement, it acknowledges that we as Black people are human beings, right? And this was something that came up, I think, last week when we had one of our calls, and we were talking about the business case. Companies like to say, like, oh yeah, there's got to be a business case for any of these efforts. Oh, really? There's got to be a business case for a human issue. There's got to be a business case for Blackness. There's got to be a business case for my existence. And so when you think about it from that lens, like you should really just kind of like flip that conversation on its head, where it's like doing right by humanity means acknowledging kind of the rich history of what has happened and what has occurred before, however painful it is. Like, acknowledgement is that first step. We've seen time and time again, like the whitewashing of history. Like, even now, when we look at even outside of Juneteenth, the massacre in Tulsa, right? For so long, like, they tried to erase that, and there are bodies in the ground. There's blood in the streets, and you know, we live with that in our DNA. But to think about this issue in terms of like a business case, I think is the wrong way to think about it. It's also a catch-22. So just thinking about that from the lens of businesses and organizations that have less than 5% Black people, and I think that was the question, is like, you got to take that first step in acknowledgement. And then the second thing, I'd be remiss if I didn't say that Flockjay, at least where we're at, we've got more than 5% Black people, right? So we're 74% BIPOC at our organization. And Juneteenth, it was a no-brainer for us to acknowledge and to celebrate. And so I will be, like many of us on this panel, be celebrating and enjoying that moment tomorrow. And hopefully I'll see all y'all out there.
Aaron, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, on mine, I look at a lot of these because I work in talent, right? And so just thinking around the continued access is an entire other part of this conversation, but you have to want to know why. You have to be curious into these types of topics, right? And I think we're definitely moving into a space where people are going to have the opportunity to choose where they want to work. You know, if I'm going to a careers page and I don't see anybody that looks like me, that's an issue. I'm probably not going to submit an application. If I get into an organization and, hey, you're a chief DEI officer or you're a leader in this organization, but I get to a meeting and I have no say, you're not listening to me. It's kind of like a brush off, sort of like, hey, good idea, but we're going to go this way because it's better for the business. I love what Rob mentioned in around, it's about being human and understanding that Black people are humans, right? And so I think the conversation stems from the curiosity of the why. And then once you understand that, it's, okay, I mean, I work in tech, so everything I think around is like operational data, like what does that tell me and how can I move those needles forward and get those small wins? And so I think it all starts around being curious. It all starts around understanding and asking your employees honestly, how can you better service them? But you shouldn't always want this to come from your Black employees, right? I think it's an entire another conversation when it comes to, Black History Month. Hey, like, let's give it to our Black ERG. You all plan everything. Most companies just started getting budget for things of that nature. It's been really ad hoc, right? And so it starts with leadership, right? Like, if you have leadership that's bought in, that cares, that's curious, I think that trickles down into middle management to your ICs that are in your organization. But if I'm in a company and my leadership is clearly uninvolved, they don't care, even if they just throw money towards something, you see that, you hear that.
Yes. Come on, Aaron.
I would turn open to hiring on LinkedIn. And so I think we're moving towards that area. And I think if people want to get ahead of the curve in that nature, it's about time to start opening up the ears and the eyes and really start making actual change, and not just doing things for an Instagram like or a LinkedIn.
Come on, Aaron. Come on. Look, you getting that part. That's the truth. Actual change, preach. Like, you just made something move up inside of me. You really made something, pop up in my head, not just doing it for Black people. Our white counterparts have to understand this is important for them as well. This is a part of your history. This isn't just Black history. There were certain things that your ancestor did or didn't do that contributed to this day. Recognize that. We have to embrace certain things that we enjoy, love, hate, that we may be shameful of about our history. You do the same. Guess what? This helps us move the needle, not just talking about Black people issues, but your issues with your history as well. Let's do the work. This is what doing the work looks like. It takes both of us to do this work, all of us to do this work. So with that being said, how do we truly advocate for diversity, within a company that says that they're invested, similar to what you alluded to, Aaron, but that's just really checking the box and it's just this performative allyship that's going on. What do we do in those instances?
One of the things for me is language is really important and really powerful. This is the reason why we've got, these companies coming out with these, diversity statements, and some of them even saying, statement of anti-racism. All right, love to see it. For me, again, getting to this practice piece, right? If your feelings and your emotions around guilt and shame and all of those negative emotions you're feeling is what's getting in your way, then I am also going to invoke that to propel you forward. And what I mean by that is when we talk about integrity, when we talk about being in alignment with what you say and what you do, that is what I want to talk about. And so when we talk about the business case, the business case is you are out of integrity. That is the business case.
Repeat that, please.
You are out of integrity. You've said this. You've not done this. You are out of integrity. Let's talk about how we can get you in integrity. You clearly care about this because this is on your website. It's on your all of the social media. You clearly care about this. Let me support you in closing that gap. That's because no one wants to feel like they're out of integrity.
Right. I love that.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
And so that's really what I'm appealing to. That's what I'm appealing to. The conversation then opens up from there. Yes. Okay. I mean, like to what you said, let me tell you something. Higher ed loves a good committee. They love a good committee. Oh, let's round up the 5 Black people we got here to do this committee. We're not gonna pay you for it though. Not gonna pay you for it though. We're gonna ask you all, please bring all of your ideas. Please bring all of you to this work. And then when you give us this proposal, thank you so much. That was the work. Only to realize that there's nothing coming out of that, right? When we talk about, listen, I actually don't want you to simply praise me and celebrate me for what I bring to the table, because what's happening with Black people is that in these workplaces, that is actually all they're celebrating. They're celebrating us going above and beyond and doing well beyond our job descriptions and all of that. And that is the only place that we have value to them. I want you to celebrate me for existing. And again, we're going back to this integrity piece. And that's where I'm starting. And that's where that conversation opens up in a way that maybe it hasn't opened up before.
I love that. And I love this idea of just integrity around
I love
existence. And if I may add a few other things there, it's also just acknowledgement. I also double down saying language, but also actions, right? So many of these companies that we talk about when we say, let's say tech, right? Under 5%, like we're in the single digits in representing all of these companies. But when you get to positions of leadership and influence, we don't necessarily exist there. And so being actionable about not just diversity, but about equity is ensuring that your board, ensuring that your cap table, ensuring that your leadership is representative of the greater population. I want to see Black people on the cap table. I want to see Black people on your board. I want to see Black people on your leadership team, and not just the leadership team that reports to the secondary leadership person, because most times, let's say it, the CDOs don't necessarily report to the CEO. Chief diversity officers historically have just been performative. But if you really want to give positions of power and influence, you do it in the right way. And so I think part of that is that is part of the conversation to me.
Yeah.
And just to add on that, I think we've seen throughout history that there's an essence of getting Black ideas for free.
Repeat that, Aaron. Message.
Louder for the people in the back. They didn't hear you.
Right.
For free. And also with no acknowledgement to the source of where that idea has come from.
Right.
That continues.
Back to slavery. Yep.
So when you say, hey, start a committee and then give us this idea and we'll run with it, what does that mean? When you have marketing teams scouring through Black Twitter for the next hot idea or the next, what does that mean? I think we've seen this historically. And so I always love to turn that conversation around and really ask leadership, what can you continue to do on your end? And I love the aspect of integrity, right? To move the needle forward. We all know that in corporate America, white America, et cetera, money moves the needle.
Yes,
if
sir.
you're tying any sort of diversity ideas towards direct OKRs, where many companies have bonuses that are qualified based on you completing certain OKRs, I bet you're going to see a little bit more emphasis on really being able to move the needle forward. And so there's a ton of different ways to be able to do this. But the biggest thing that I want to contribute to this conversation as well is don't just take these ideas and run with them because it makes the organization look better, but doing it because it makes everyone within your community, within your company better and able to see growth, able to make change. That's why a bunch of companies have high retention issues, right? You can bring in 100 Black people, but if those 100 Black people are leaving the company within 12 months, what's really going on? So there's always a deeper issue in peeling back the onion and understanding, okay, the performative aspect of it, I think that's an old conversation now. We all know that's a thing, but how can we continue to take that? It's like, okay, you try to show you care, let's actually hold the feet to the fire and move things forward. So I think we see a lot of things are tied to money. And so I think really putting that aspect there and really moving it forward, I think can add a little bit of structure. So.
Yes, I am getting a whole lot of snaps. You better talk from everyone here in the chat, and I'm loving it. And I want to say this, what came to mind for me is, you know, we're here sharing these gems and jewels, right? But we get tired and exhausted. So what does it look like to really equip and weaponize our white brothers and sisters, or our Latin brothers and sisters, or our Asian brothers and sisters to speak on, you know, our behalf? How does that look? How have you done that in the past?
I think on mine, it's leading with, it's again going back to being curious, asking questions. It's not. I mean, slavery is not a comfortable situation in conversation, right? It's not supposed to be easy to jump into the pool and just wade in the water, right? It's supposed to really be able to be something where you come to the conversation curious and wanting to learn more, not for yourself, but for the people around you. And so I think after becoming, you know, aware and being part of that conversation, what can you do specifically in your communities, or to simply support other communities in that aspect? So I think there's an aspect of, you know, being curious, asking questions, being okay with being wrong. I always love to talk around this aspect.
I like that.
When it comes to DEI, or just like most things in life, it's a journey. We're not all going to be on the same level. Someone may be on mile 1, someone may be on mile 32.
Right.
But as long as you're on that journey, you recognize you're on that journey and you're making efforts to continue forward movement on that journey, I personally wouldn't have a problem. But I think it's when you become, you know, hey, I reached mile 2, I got it, I understand everything, I'm going to move on to this other journey and I'm going to be, you know, lackluster in this area. I think that's where it cultivates an issue to where it's like, okay, like, are Black people just worth 2 miles? Or is there really another aspect that we can just continue diving into?
Yeah.
And I just want to call out Elizabeth real quick, because she said, how do I ask questions but not look like an ass? And I'm saying, look like an ass for one day, okay?
Yeah.
That's that curiosity, and that's that learning. That's how you grow in cultural intelligence, and that leads to cultural humility. So we've looked like an ass plenty of times, but we're still here, still standing, still resilient, and moving forward. But go ahead, Rob, I cut you off.
Not my heart.
Right, exactly.
Absolutely. And I plus one all of that. And I think the other thing that I would add to the table here is just like, accept your own privilege. Like, you have privilege being a white person. And if you are deeply curious, like, I think that's the first step, is just accepting the fact that you have that. And you're not going to be right all the time. You might make some mistakes, but if you're leading with empathy, if you're leading with genuine curiosity, I think like that's a great initial step.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. And one thing I'll say, you know, I know who my comrades are, you know, I know who the people are who are like, you know what, even listen, they're not afraid to say, I don't know this, but I know that this does not sit with, you know, this does not sit with me, and something needs to be done, and I want to like do the work. I can work with that. I think especially as a facilitator, right? Like, part of it is, and this goes back to your point, Aaron, in terms of like understanding like where people are. There are people who are coming to the conversation that are like, this conversation, I just heard about this right now in this webinar. First time I heard about this, you know what I'm saying? And as a facilitator, part of my role is like, you know what? Let's keep that interest. Let's keep that, to what you were saying, Rob, that curiosity. And I, you know, for me, particularly in the role as a facilitator, I'm really working with you to help you along the way, because and find the spaces where people are literally doing that work and where that is their charge. And I want to be clear about that, because when I'm in a role of a facilitator, I am clear that my role is to meet you where you are and support you in moving you forward, right? Now, on Saturday, okay,
when I take off that
hat, that's not the time to run up on me in the street and tell me that that's not the time. I'm in my element, okay? I ain't got time for that on Saturday on June. You understand what I'm saying?
Right.
But seriously, but find the spaces, right? There are so many spaces to do this work. There are so many people who have the lived experience and the knowledge and the skill to facilitate these conversations that are waiting for you to step into that opportunity. Find them and start doing the work. Start there.
Yes. And And I just want to add to that because, you know, as an executive coach, this is exactly what I do, D&I executive coaching. And so we have white leaders. I mean, we have Black leaders, right? How do I bring this awareness to my talent and my team? We have white leaders that's like, I'm afraid. I feel like it's a zero-sum game. Seek coaching on it. Seek opportunities to learn and develop and to rid yourself of this fear. Fear of what? Really get clear on what that is. Is it fear to protect self or to really make an impact in your environment, in your organization?
Yep.
I'm just saying.
And what I'm not interested in is that person who just wants to check mark the box.
Come on.
I talked about that person today. I donated my $50 to my Black Lives Matter organization in 2020, right? Like, no, like that's not the business, right? And like authentic curiosity, and like let me add the authenticity
I love that.
to that, right?
Mm-hmm. Explain what that is, Rob.
It means,
I love that.
Yeah, what that means is you genuinely, from a human to human connection, want to understand how to be better, do better, and connect into a space that you might not understand,
right?
In a way that might feel uncomfortable to you, but in a way that you show up. You show up in a way that connects on, I guess I'll bring it back to a human level, right? So
yes, sir.
Human connection.
Yes, sir. Marsha says it takes real work and commitment to make change. The reality is sometimes we just don't want to make the commitment.
100%. And I think I was reminded yesterday that it was the 1 year anniversary from everyone posting those Black squares on Instagram. I think like at least probably like 80% of my friends like posted that Black square, Black, white, Latino, Asian, etc. And so my question there is, what's been done in the last year on your end? That self-reflection on, hey, I posted this Black square. I wanted to show solidarity. What have you done since then?
Right. To
show solidarity, to show action, to show support for the community. I think that alone is just like one big question to really kind of look internally to self and really understanding, am I being performative and how I'm wanting to celebrate and support this community, or am I actually doing action that is moving the needle forward as well?
Yes, I just want to share the community comments. Ruben says spiritual community, communion is needed, beauty, harmony, inspiration, order, and peace. So thank you for those kind words, Ruben. And so as we push the conversation forward, what does it look like to truly stand in solidarity with your Black talent? How can these leaders and individual contributors here do that?
One thing, Rob, go for it. Right there.
Yeah, I think, what's coming to me at the second is it looks like allowing space for healing, allowing space for community and celebration. It looks like dismantling internal structures that have historically been intentional on holding Black brilliant talent back from advancement. Looks like checking your privilege at the door. And it looks like allowing us to exist. And thrive.
I like that. Francesca, you said something just listening to him that made me think back when you were working with a leader and when he talked about that healing piece, and your leader said something that was so profound. I need you to repeat that and share it here on this webinar. It aligns with what Rob was saying.
Yeah. One of the things, and this goes back to us, even as Black individuals in this workplace, feeling like we have to go above and beyond in order to be worthy in this space, right? And I remember distinctly when I was in conversation with this particular supervisor, we were talking about working on a project with someone who was known to be difficult to work with. And I said, don't worry about it. I know how to work with difficult people. And he said something to me so profound, which was, I don't want you to learn from traumatic experiences. I want you to learn from positive ones. And for me, that really just shifted everything for me, because one, I became clear that I was starting to become content. And I was starting to normalize this experience of being traumatized in the workplace. And right, like, and they will allow it. Like the
Right.
workplace will allow you to exploit and lean into that if you let them. And he allowed me, you know, and as a white man, he said to me, no, that's not what we're doing here. And that really shifted the conversation for me and really just completely shifted how I engage in the workplace to begin with, you know? And so to the question of like, what can you do to support your Black talent, right? One of the things that I also mentioned to you, Hakimia, was this thing about, don't just bring me into the space, right? Like, you know, I'll say it.
Say it how you told me.
I'll say it the way
say
I
it.
said it, right? I'll say it the way I said it, which was set me up, but don't set me up.
Repeat,
Set
message.
me up, but don't set me up. And what I mean by that is set me up to be successful, to thrive, give me the coaching, give me everything that I need, acknowledge that I might not have had access to the networks that some of my colleagues might have had access to, and I might need additional support. By the way, that's what equity is, redistribution of resources, okay? And so,
yes, ma'am.
Like, set me up to be successful and to what you said, Rob, to thrive. Don't set me up, don't bring me in like Rob, like with the recruiting piece. You know, like don't simply bring me in, and Aaron, you can speak to this too. Don't bring me in and then, right, then I'm floundering. And then if I exit, it's like, oh, that just means something about that person. No, you set me up. You brought me into a situation where you've done no work at all to make the environment inclusive. You've done no work at all to be equitable. And as a result, I am not thriving here. And that is why I'm not thriving. You brought me on board because clearly I'm excellent. So obviously I'm not the issue here, right?
Yes,
and so
yes,
what
ma'am.
are you doing and how have you failed me? And more importantly, what are you going to do to make sure that you don't fail us moving forward? That is the question.
Yes.
Know? And so the last thing I'll say is one thing that I really like to add is I like to ask people questions. I like to really engage people in inquiry, right? We might have our reasons and ideas around why people don't continue to work, right? And what I like to ask them is, what does it do for you to not continue the work?
Repeat that question, please.
What does it do for you to not continue this work? I want you to articulate to me what you are gaining from not continuing your own development as a human being.
Come on.
And that is a very different conversation.
It is. And I just want to tell you, somebody said, I just slammed my coffee cup down. And Femi says, no tokenism over here. And Aaron, I know you have some key points, like how we talked about it pre-call, not to set me up, to set me up. So please share some of your pointers.
Yeah, no, I mean, that was my second time hearing the don't set me up to set me up, but I'm still floored by it. But I think there's this aspect, I love the aspect, like, I am not your Black token employee. Like, that's not me. That's not who I am. That's not my like full self, right? And I think within a lot of these things, there's an aspect of systemic barriers that are introduced and that still stand from where we see them, whether it's the prison industrial complex, voter suppression, education, but also in hiring. If you want to understand how can you continue to support Black employees and create a more diverse, inclusive, and equitable culture, first step, how are you hiring? Taking that step back and understanding, okay, what areas of barriers are in our process? How are we introducing bias at different levels of the process? Why don't we have Black talent interested in our organization? I hear it over and over again, and it makes me cringe. There's not enough Black talent. That's not true. There are tons of Black talent. You're either not looking in the right places, or you just simply don't want Black talent in your organization, and you haven't taken the necessary steps to really peel back that idea and understanding of why we don't have Black talent in our organization. And going and hiring a chief diversity, equity, inclusion officer is not the answer. It's just not. But there's things you can do as far as minimizing bias in the hiring process, whether that be around ensuring that you have strategic questions and a structured interviewing panel on the thing, preparation for it. Is your job description inclusive and welcoming for people that across different sorts of areas, right? So I think the first step, I mean, not just necessarily the first step, but a quick step that everyone can start on Monday, because we're celebrating Juneteenth tomorrow, most places, is that take that, there's systemic things in your company that you can do to really peel back and really understand, okay, how can we today start making some sorts of meaningful movements forward to ensure that Black people want to work in my organization. Black people come into my organization and feel heard. They feel like they are able to come here and grow. They feel like they're able to come here and add meaningful impact and not just be someone that's on your careers page smiling, hey, we got Black people in our company, come and work with us. So I think there's a ton of systemic things around that as well, but there's tons of easy ways that you can really start moving the needle. And it's not easy, and I say easy as in easy to think about, because it's a ton of work, right? You're not just going to look at your interview process and you're going to be like, oh, okay, we need to do X, Y, and Z. All right, boom, we're going to start hiring Black people. It's a process. I think tons of times companies look for the easy win or what's the cheapest win to considering the bottom line, right?
Right.
So it's not supposed to be easy. It's supposed to be hard. It's supposed to be uncomfortable. But if you do the work, you will slowly start to see those wins continuing to pile in. And ultimately, you're building a better community for your employees, whether they're Black or not, to really start be able to grow in their own selves and communities.
Yes, sir. So starting with Rob, the question of the hour is, if an organization wants to add Juneteenth as a standard holiday, how do we do that? What does that look like to ensure that everyone feels included?
Ooh. To add it as a holiday internally to your organization, I think you need to start having conversations with your Black team members. I think that to the point of what we've been making throughout this conversation is ensuring that those who are making these decisions, those who are driving these decisions, those who are getting paid to drive these conversations look reflective of the holiday. And I know that part of this is taking that step and having those uncomfortable conversations internally and checking yourself at the door, both from the perspective of leadership as well as the perspective of like your thesis for your company, and just diving headfirst into those uncomfortable conversations and making sure that you're just being extremely intentional around the why, extremely intentional around the supports, and extremely intentional around just forward momentum and progress.
Thank you for sharing, Francesca.
Yes. So speaking to that, the question of the why, I think one thing, and the intentionality, one thing that's really important is that when you're rolling this out, it's not simply we're celebrating Juneteenth as a company, everyone take the day off. It's we are acknowledging that there is work to be done here. And there are some of us in this country and in this organization that still have work to do. And in order to support that, here are specific opportunities that we are funding in order for you to be in those spaces where you can ask those challenging questions. I know that even at ThinkHuman has supported my own professional development, right? There's a fantastic workshop that I recently went to called Getting to the Root. And really, it's an opportunity to be in a space and explore these systemic issues and the ways in which racism is at the root of it all. And so don't simply just say, hey, it's a day off. It's an opportunity for us to reflect. If you do not identify with this community or if you don't know a lot about Juneteenth, we are paying and investing for you all to actually take these steps and get this education that you need.
Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am. Erin, you have anything to add?
Intentionality.
I think intentionality.
Francesca and Rob, I don't want to be too repetitive here, but it's around intentionality on my end.
Yeah, yes, sir. Yes, sir. And I close with this. Hey, we are changing the generations to come. So we have to do the work now. So if you are uncomfortable, imagine what your kids and their kids may feel. We want to rid them of all of that and make things anew and beneficial for all. So I leave you with this as we close. Today has been a very special day for us all. We came here to celebrate, to bring awareness, to embrace our history, to educate, to learn past, and to be able to move forward in unity, knowing that we all have contributed to the greatness of this country, American history, our history. Go out and be a better version of yourself. Use this recording, share it, and continue to be great. Blessings to all. Stay divinely powered up.
Home is filled with pain, and it might not be such a bad idea if I never went home again. Stand as far away from me as you can and ask me why. Hang on to your rosary beads, close your eyes to watch me die. You keep saying, kick it, quit it, God, but did you ever try to turn your sick soul inside out so that the